I remember standing there with my suitcase, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Just a few days earlier, I couldn't believe I was finally in Europe. It was a dream I'd imagined for so long, but in that moment, none of that mattered. I wasn't thinking about famous landmarks. I wasn't thinking about beautiful cities. I was thinking about one thing. Maybe I should just go home. Looking around, everyone else seemed to know exactly where they were going. They looked confident, comfortable, like they belonged there. Meanwhile, I felt completely out of place. I started asking myself questions I'd never expected to ask. Did I make the right decision? Am I really cut out for this? Should I end this trip before it gets even harder? But here's the strange part. Looking back now, I'm incredibly grateful that I didn't give up that day, because what happened next completely changed the rest of my Europe trip, and taught me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned about travel, and about myself. If you've ever dreamed of traveling, felt overwhelmed in a new place, or questioned a decision that once excited you, I think you'll relate to this story. Chapter 1. The trip I dreamed about for years. To understand why I almost gave up on my Europe trip, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before I packed my suitcase. Long before I boarded the plane. Europe had been a dream. Like so many people, I imagined charming streets, beautiful architecture, incredible history, and the excitement of exploring places I'd only ever seen in photos and videos. Every time I watched a travel documentary or saw someone's vacation pictures, I would think to myself, one day, I'll be there too. When that day finally arrived, it didn't feel real. Walking through the airport with my passport in my hand, I kept smiling. I had worked hard for this opportunity. I had planned, saved, researched, and now the adventure was finally beginning. During the flight, I imagined everything that was waiting for me. The famous landmarks, the food, the train journeys, the stories I would bring home. I honestly believed this trip would be one exciting moment after another. And to be fair, the first few moments were exactly that. Everything felt new, every street seemed beautiful, even simple things like hearing different languages around me made me stop and smile. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I hoped it would be. But travel has a way of teaching us something unexpected. It reminds us that real adventures aren't made up of perfect moments. They're made up of unexpected ones. The kind you can't plan for. The kind no travel guide warns you about. And it wasn't a missed train, or bad weather, or getting lost, that almost ended my trip. It was something much quieter. Something I never expected. Looking back now, I realize that the hardest part of my Europe trip wasn't finding my way through unfamiliar cities. It was finding my confidence in a place where everything felt unfamiliar. At the time, I didn't know it yet, but I was about to face a moment that would make me question whether I should continue the journey at all. Chapter 2. The moment everything changed. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't one big disaster. No one stole my luggage. I didn't miss an important train. Nothing dramatic happened. Instead, it was a lot of small moments that slowly began to add up. For the first time since arriving in Europe, the excitement started to fade. The streets that had seemed magical just a day before suddenly felt unfamiliar. The language around me reminded me that I was far from home. People were busy with their own lives. They knew where they were going. I was the one trying to figure everything out. I remember standing in a busy train station, looking at the departure board. Names of cities I couldn't pronounce. Platforms changing. Announcements I couldn't fully understand. For a moment, I felt completely overwhelmed. I checked my phone. I checked my ticket. Then I checked everything again, just to make sure I hadn't made a mistake. That's when something unexpected happened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was doubt. The quiet kind of doubt that whispers, maybe this trip is too much for you. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I'd feel better in a few minutes. But the feeling stayed. As the day went on, I found myself missing the little things I had never thought much about before. Hearing familiar voices. Knowing exactly where to go. Feeling like I belong. For the first time since arriving in Europe, I didn't feel like an explorer. I felt like a stranger. And that's when the thought entered my mind. Maybe I should just go home. I didn't tell anyone. I kept walking, but inside, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue. Looking back now, that wasn't the end of my journey. It was the beginning of the lesson that would completely change the way I travel. Because just when I thought my trip was falling apart, something happened that reminded me why I had come in the first place. Chapter 3. The moment that changed everything. After sitting with those thoughts for a while, I realized something. I had two choices. I could let fear decide how the rest of my trip would go, or I could take one small step forward. Not a giant leap, just one step. So I picked up my suitcase, took a deep breath, and walked toward the platform. I didn't suddenly become confident. I still had questions. I still felt uncertain, but I kept moving. As I boarded the train, I looked out of the window and watched the city slowly disappear behind me. Somewhere during that journey, I stopped focusing on everything that felt unfamiliar. Instead, I started noticing everything that had gone right. I had made it this far. I'd found my way. I'd solved every small problem that had come my way. Maybe I was doing better than I was giving myself credit for. That simple thought changed my entire mindset. When I arrived at my next destination, I made a promise to myself. I'm going to stop trying to have the perfect trip. I'm just going to experience it. From that moment on, everything felt different. I smiled more. I asked for directions when I needed help. I stopped worrying about making small mistakes. Instead of seeing every challenge as proof that I didn't belong, I started seeing each one as part of the adventure. And something interesting happened. The more open I became, the less intimidating Europe felt. The cities hadn't changed. The stations hadn't changed. The language hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed was me. That's when I understood something I'll never forget. Confidence doesn't usually arrive before the journey. It grows because of the journey. And if I had gone home that day, I would have missed the very experiences that gave me the confidence I was looking for. That realization stayed with me for the rest of my trip, and it's a lesson I still carry with me today. Chapter 4. The trip I almost missed. Something changed after that day. Not because every problem suddenly disappeared. I still got confused in train stations. I still took wrong turns from time to time. I still had moments where I felt completely out of my comfort zone. But those moments didn't scare me anymore. Instead, they reminded me that I was exactly where I wanted to be. With each new city, I became a little more confident. Ordering food became easier. Using public transport felt less intimidating. Even getting lost started to feel like part of the adventure instead of a failure. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in a quiet town square, watching people go about their day. Children were laughing. Friends were talking over coffee. A street musician was playing nearby. And I caught myself smiling. Not because something extraordinary had happened, but because I realized something. Just a few days earlier, I had almost walked away from all of this. If I had listened to my fear, I would have missed moments like this. Moments that never appear in travel brochures. Moments that don't make headlines. But moments that become the memories you carry home. That's when I understood that travel isn't about having a perfect itinerary. It's about giving yourself permission to grow through the unexpected. The places I visited were beautiful. But the greatest part of the journey wasn't the places themselves. It was discovering that I was capable of more than I had believed. Every challenge I overcame quietly built my confidence. Every unfamiliar situation reminded me that growth rarely happens inside our comfort zones. Looking back now, I don't remember that difficult day as the moment my trip almost ended. I remember it as the day my real journey finally began. Chapter 5. Why I'm glad I didn't give up. Looking back now, I'm actually grateful for the day I almost gave up on my Europe trip. At the time, it felt like my confidence was disappearing. But in reality, it was being rebuilt. Before that trip, I thought confidence came first. I believed confident people were the ones who traveled easily, who always knew what to do, who never felt afraid. Now I see it differently. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to keep going even when fear is sitting beside you. That lesson didn't just help me travel. It changed the way I approach new experiences in life. Whenever I face something unfamiliar now, I remember that day in Europe. I remember standing there, wondering if I should go home. And I remember how close I came to missing some of the most meaningful moments of my journey. Travel taught me something I couldn't have learned from a book, or a video, or a travel guide. It taught me that growth often begins the moment we decide not to turn back. If every part of my trip had gone exactly as planned, I probably would have remembered the places. But because things became difficult, I remembered the lesson, and strangely enough, that's become my favorite memory of all. So if you're dreaming about taking your first trip to Europe, or you're about to step into something that feels completely outside your comfort zone, let me leave you with this. Don't expect yourself to have all the answers on day one. Don't expect every moment to feel exciting. And don't assume that a difficult day means you've made the wrong decision. Sometimes, the day you want to give up is the very day your real journey begins. I'm so glad I stayed, because Europe gave me beautiful memories, but it also gave me something even more valuable. Proof that I was stronger than I thought. Ending. I'm glad I kept going. When I think back to that day now, I'm not embarrassed that I wanted to go home. I'm grateful I was honest enough to admit that I was struggling. Travel has a way of reminding us that we're human. It puts us in unfamiliar places. It tests our patience. It challenges our confidence. But if we keep moving forward, it also helps us discover strengths we never knew we had. Europe gave me incredible memories. Beautiful cities, amazing history, unforgettable experiences. But the greatest thing I brought home wasn't something I could pack in my suitcase. It was confidence. The confidence that comes from overcoming something you once thought was impossible. So if you're planning your first trip to Europe, or you're standing at the beginning of any journey that feels overwhelming, remember this. A difficult day doesn't mean you've chosen the wrong path. Sometimes, it's simply the beginning of becoming stronger. I'm incredibly thankful that I didn't let one difficult moment decide the rest of my story. Because some of my favorite memories happened after the day I almost gave up. And maybe that's the lesson I hope you'll take with you today. Keep going, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you doubt yourself. Because you never know what amazing experiences might be waiting just around the corner. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been so close to giving up on something, but you're really glad you didn't? It doesn't have to be about travel. Share your story in the comments. I'd genuinely love to read it. If you enjoy honest travel stories that explore not just the places we visit, but the lessons they teach us, I'd love to welcome you to the Travel Wander community. Subscribe, and join me next week for another true story from my travels. One that completely changed the way I think about exploring the world. Until then, take that trip you've been dreaming about. Stay curious. Be kind to yourself when things don't go as planned. And remember, the journey that changes your life is often the one you almost gave up on. I'll see you in the next adventure.